In Module 1, we're going to cover some background basics about I-10s. What is an I-10? As you've probably figured out by now, the IRS loves acronyms, so this is yet another one that stands for Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. And it is just that. It's an ID number for people who need to file a U.S. tax return and who don't have and aren't eligible to receive a Social Security number. It looks just like a Social Security number. It always has 9 digits, um, but a difference is that it always starts with the number 9. The number is issued by the IRS. So while the tax centers help people apply for I-10s, we don't actually issue them. Just like Social Security numbers come from the Social Security Administration, I-10s come from the IRS. I-10s have been around since the 1980s, so you may see various forms in the tax centers. When the IRS first started the I-10 program, it issued I-10s on cards, very similar to Social Security cards. And this is an example of one that you might see. Obviously, it's not going to have all 9s on it, but that is the format of an I-10. And you may very well see one of these in the tax center. If you're helping a client who's had her I-10 for a long time, more than likely she's going to have an I-10 card. Because people were getting confused about what was an I-10, what was a Social Security number several years ago, the IRS switched gears and they started issuing I-10s on a letter that have a light green background. And this may not show up too well on your screen, but that is a light green background on the letter. And this is the more frequent form that you're likely to see in the tax center, again, because these are the ones that have been issued most recently. Just understand that both forms are valid. Just like Social Security numbers, I-10s don't ever expire, with some exceptions that we'll talk about a little bit later. So what is the purpose of an I-10? As I mentioned earlier, it's issued by the IRS to allow workers without Social Security numbers to file their tax returns. They also are issued to spouses and dependents who do not have Social Security numbers. They're issued for tax purposes. There are some other entities that use them for different reasons, like opening a bank account, applying for a mortgage, applying for financial aid to go to college, renting an apartment. But the IRS insists that they be used for tax purposes. What is an I-10 not used for? Well, it doesn't change a person's legal status in the U.S. It doesn't give them permission to work here. It does not entitle them to public benefits. And important for our purposes is the fact that an I-10 does not entitle a family to receive the earned income credit. Also in Texas, you can't use an I-10 to get a driver's license. On the other hand, it does not mean that a person is in the country illegally. I-10 holders may be here on student, scholar, or tourist visas. They may be a foreign investor or so forth. Just because someone has an I-10 does not necessarily mean they are here illegally. Who can apply for an I-10? Anyone who's required to file a U.S. tax return but is not eligible for a Social Security number may apply. In addition, a spouse or dependent who is not eligible for a social may apply for an I-10. A spouse can live anywhere in the world and apply so long as that spouse agrees to be treated as a U.S. resident for tax purposes and they claim their worldwide income on the U.S. tax return. However, for dependents, they must live in the U.S., Mexico, or Canada. Dependents who live in a country anywhere other than the U.S., Mexico, or Canada are not eligible for I-10s. What this means is that even though I may provide all the support for my child who lives in Peru, I'm not going to be able to claim him as a dependent on my tax return because he's not eligible for an I-10. As you know, everybody who shows up on a tax return has to have a tax ID number. Who cannot apply for an I-10? Well, anyone who's eligible for a Social Security number can't apply. Anyone who's not listed on a tax return may not apply, with a few exceptions, but you will never see those in the tax centers. Just remember that I-10s are for tax purposes. And then, as we've talked about, any dependent who lives in a country other than the U.S., Mexico, or Canada is not eligible for an I-10. A frequent question I hear is, by completing a Form W-7, aren't I helping this person engage in illegal activity? The short answer is no. First of all, the tax centers do not engage or support any kind of illegal activity, so we certainly wouldn't be training you to do anything less than honorable. In addition, the IRS says, and I quote, I-10s are issued to help individuals comply with U.S. tax laws and to provide a means to efficiently process and account for tax returns and payments for those not eligible for Social Security numbers. So if a person lives and works in the U.S., if they need to file taxes, and if they don't qualify for a Social Security number, you're helping them comply with the law. But with that said, we're never going to ask you to prepare a tax return you don't feel good about. So you always are able to politely excuse yourself from the client and discuss with your manager the option of someone else, some other volunteer, finishing up that return. What about confidentiality? I-10 information is strictly protected by the Internal Revenue Code Section 6103. The IRS does not report any type of I-10 information to anyone or to any agency. The only exception is if a person is under investigation for a crime or if they're suspected of terrorist activities. And even then, federal agencies have to first get a court order before the IRS will release any type of information. What about immigration status? Does an I-10 help that? Well, it may, because even though the I-10 doesn't give the person a legal right to live or work here, it does give the ability to file taxes. And showing that you have filed and paid your taxes is one of the requirements of the legalization process. A lot of the clients that you're going to help in the tax center are already on a pathway to becoming citizens. And so you're really helping them fulfill a vital obligation and get one step further along that path. Well, you got the basics down now. So next we're going to go to the easy part in Module 2 about completing the application, which is a Form W-7.